A billionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test his fiancée, but the housekeeper proves true love. Subscribe to the channel and comment on where you are watching from. The sun was still battling the morning fog when Edward Morris adjusted the reins of his Arabian horse, contemplating the thousands of acres that stretched before him. At 45, the agribusiness magnate had built an empire that began with a small property inherited from his grandfather in Springfield and now spanned 3 states. His main estate in Miami was a masterpiece of modern architecture, a mansion of glass and exposed concrete that harmoniously contrasted with the preserved native vegetation, boasting a privileged view of Biscayne Bay. Edward was of medium height, with greying hair slicked back and brown eyes that always seemed to be calculating some strategy. His calloused hands betrayed that despite his fortune, he had never completely abandoned manual labor. He always wore simple clothes, jeans, leather boots, and cotton shirts, but of impeccable quality. His angular face bore the marks of time and the battles won in the business world, with wrinkles that deepened when he smiled, which happened rarely. "Good morning, my love," said Helen Anderson, appearing on the porch of the main house in a pink silk robe with a cup of coffee in hand. At 32, she was everything one would expect from a successful digital influencer. Perfectly styled blonde hair even just waking up, tanned skin, a body sculpted by personal trainers and aesthetic procedures. Her blue eyes sparkled with calculated charm, and her voice carried the neutral accent typical of someone who had spent years honing their diction for the cameras. "Helen," Edward waved from afar, not showing the enthusiasm she expected. "I'm going for a ride to the southern boundary of the property. I'll be back for lunch." She forced a smile and waved back, but as soon as Edward disappeared among the trees, her expression changed completely. She picked up her phone and began recording posts for her 2 million followers. "Good morning, everyone. Here at my love's estate, check out this wonderful view. Today I'll show you the closet I set up here." Her voice took on an artificial tone, completely different from the one she had used with Edward moments before. Inside the house, Maria Smith had already been preparing breakfast for 2 hours. At 38, she carried on her face the unique blend of sweetness and determination that marks women from Texas forged by struggle. Her brown skin was marked by the sun of Texas, where she was born and raised until the age of 25. Her brown eyes expressed a depth that contrasted with her apparent simplicity. Curly hair pulled into a practical bun, small but firm hands, and a smile that lit up any room. "Miss Helen, the coffee is ready," announced Maria, setting the table on the porch with the silent efficiency of someone who had learned to anticipate needs. "Thank you, Maria. Oh, and can you make those pancakes you do? I'm going to film a video about regional breakfast," Helen replied, without taking her eyes off her phone, where she was checking the comments on her posts. Maria nodded and returned to the kitchen, her personal domain in the mansion. That space was a fascinating contrast. Modern and expensive equipment coexisted with traditional utensils she had brought from Texas. Clay pots, a worn wooden spoon, jars of spices that perfumed the air with cloves, cinnamon, and coriander. In the refrigerator, photos of her 2 children, Jack, 12, and Emma, and 9, smiled from a simple house in Austin, where they lived with their maternal grandmother. While preparing the pancake batter, Maria let a radio station broadcasting directly from Austin play softly in the background. The announcer's voice announced, "And now live from the studios of Texas Radio, the country music that warms the Texan heart." The familiar rhythm of the accordion made her smile and work with even more care. Edward returned 2 hours later, sweaty and with a more tense expression than usual. He had spent the entire morning thinking about the conversation he had overheard the night before. Helen on the phone with someone, whispering about speeding up the process and securing the future. The words echoed in his mind like a constant alert. "How was the ride, dear?" Helen greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, completely ignoring the sweat and the smell of horse. Her hands, with perfectly polished nails, contrasted with his tanned and calloused skin. "Normal. I need to take a shower," Edward replied tersely, heading for the couple's room upstairs. The mansion had 3 floors. The ground floor concentrated the social areas, a living room with a double-height ceiling, a stone fireplace, and an entire wall of glass overlooking the garden, a gourmet kitchen, an office with a library, and a spacious gourmet porch with a barbecue grill and pizza oven. The second floor housed the master suite and 2 guest rooms, all with views of the lagoon. The third floor, smaller, was Helen's studio where she filmed her content, and a gym with professional equipment. As Edward climbed the stairs, his boots made a dry noise on the hardwood floor. He stopped halfway and observed Helen through the reflection of one of the large windows. She was back on, her phone recording another post, this time pretending to savor Maria's pancakes. "Guys, how delicious. Maria makes the best pancakes in the world. Traditional recipe from Texas, right, Maria?" Maria just smiled shyly and continued collecting the dishes, used to being a supporting role in Helen's videos. Edward noticed the difference. When Helen spoke to her, there was a polite coldness, almost condescending. When Maria prepared the food or took care of the house, there was genuine love in every gesture. In that moment, observing the 2 women who shared his daily life, Edward made a decision that would change everything. He climbed As he descended the remaining stairs with firmer steps, he entered the bathroom, and as the hot water from the shower cascaded down his face, he formulated a plan that would test the hearts of everyone around him. 10 months, he murmured to himself. 10 months to find out who really cares about me. He didn't yet know that he was about to discover that true love often wears simple clothes and speaks with the soft voice of the countryside, while falsehood hides behind perfect smiles and sweet words. What was to come would reveal not only the character of the people around him, but also his own capacity to love and be truly loved. The morning of March 15th, 2024, began like any other, but it would become a turning point in the lives of everyone in the estate. Edward went down for breakfast with a more serious expression than usual, greeted Helen with a formal kiss on the forehead, and headed straight to the table already set by Maria on the porch. "Did you sleep well, my love?" Helen asked, fixing her hair while discreetly checking the light for a possible morning selfie. "Sort of. I had some strange nightmares," Edward lied, as he watched Maria serve his black coffee without sugar. She had memorized his preferences during the 6 months she had worked there. "I dreamed I was falling off a cliff." Maria shuddered slightly upon hearing that, making the sign of the cross discreetly. "God forbid, Mr. Edward. Falling dreams are not a good sign," she murmured with the melodic accent of Texas. Helen laughed dismissively. "Maria, what a silly superstition. They're just random synapses firing in the brain during REM sleep." She turned to Edward with an air of intellectual superiority. "Dear, you know you can't pay attention to those folk beliefs." The look Maria directed at Helen lasted only a fraction of a second, but Edward caught the mix of hurt and resignation. It was always like this. Helen subtly but constantly belittled Maria, especially when she wanted to demonstrate her supposed cultural superiority. "I'm going to ride a bit before lunch," Edward announced, standing up from the table. "I need to think about some important business decisions." "Do you want me to come along? I can film some content about country living," Helen suggested, already imagining the likes a romantic video would garner. "No, I'd rather go alone. You can take the opportunity to work on your projects," Edward replied, kissing her again on the forehead. At 10:30 in the morning, Edward saddled Thunder, his nearly 10-year-old black stallion, and set off toward the more distant pastures. The sky was clear, with a few scattered clouds casting moving shadows over the green field. The wind carried the smell of damp earth and freshly cut grass, mixed with the aroma of the blooming wildflowers. When he reached a secluded area near a small creek that ran through the property, Edward dismounted and checked his phone. He had signal, just as he had planned. He took a deep breath, once again contemplating whether he really wanted to do this. Helen's words on the phone the night before echoed in his mind. Edward has been acting a bit strange lately. If something were to happen to him, at least I would have guarantees, right? "I'm sorry, Thunder," he whispered to the horse, giving a hard slap to his own face to leave a red mark. Then he lay down on the ground near a fence, positioning himself to look as if he had been thrown from the horse. He grabbed some dirt and rubbed it on his clothes, tousled his hair, and finally dialed the emergency number. "Hello? I need an ambulance urgently," he shouted with a choked voice. "I've had a horse accident. I'm at Green Lake. Coordinates." He provided the exact location and pretended to faint, letting the phone drop beside him. 20 minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the silence of the countryside. The ambulance arrived almost simultaneously with Helen's car, which had been alerted by the paramedics. Maria was in the back seat, her eyes red from crying and her hands visibly trembling. "Edward! My God, Edward!" Helen ran toward the stretcher where he was being examined, but her tears seemed more performative than genuine. Maria approached more slowly, her hands clasped in prayer. "Ma'am, he is conscious but cannot move his neck or limbs," the paramedic explained. "We need to take him to the hospital immediately for further tests." "Could it be serious, doctor?" Helen asked, already mentally calculating the implications. "It's premature to say, but horse accidents can cause spinal cord injuries. We'll know more after the tests." Maria moved closer to the stretcher and gently touched Edward's hand. "Mr. Edward, I will pray very hard for you. Saint Benedict will protect you. You can trust." Her voice was a whisper filled with genuine emotion. At the most expensive private hospital in Miami, Edward underwent a battery of tests orchestrated by the doctors he had secretly hired weeks earlier. Dr. Mark Sanders, a renowned neurologist who had agreed to participate in the ruse for a generous payment and the promise of complete confidentiality, took over the case. "The Morris family." Dr. Sanders appeared in the waiting room where Helen was frantically typing on her phone, probably updating her followers about the drama she was experiencing. Maria was sitting in a chair in the corner with a rosary between her fingers. "Yes, I'm his fiancée. How is he?" Helen quickly stood up, fixing her hair for possible photos. "Unfortunately, the news is not good. Mr. Edward suffered a severe injury to the cervical region of the spinal cord. There is significant compression resulting in complete paralysis from the neck down." The silence that followed was broken by a muffled sob from Maria. "Doctor, but he will get better, right? He will be able to walk again." Dr. Sanders, fulfilling his role, shook his head negatively. "It's a very serious injury. The chances of recovery are practically nil. He will retain cognitive functions, but physically—" "My God," Maria whispered, making the sign of the cross. Helen remained silent for a few seconds, processing the information. When she finally spoke, her voice had an almost imperceptible coldness. "Doctor, what are the exact medical implications? Will he need special care? For how long?" "Comprehensive care will be necessary, 24 hours a day for the rest of his life. Constant physical therapy, special equipment, specialized nursing." "The rest of his life," Helen repeated, as if testing the taste of the words. Maria struggled to rise from the chair, as if the weight of the news had bent her. "Doctor, can I see him, please?" 2 hours later, Edward was settled in a VIP suite at the hospital, connected to monitors and equipment that completed his scene. When Helen entered the room, she first checked to see if anyone was watching before approaching the bed. "Edward, can you hear me?" Her voice sounded worried, but her eyes were already calculating something. Edward, with great difficulty, managed to blink once. The signal they had agreed upon for yes before the accident. The doctors said that you won't be able to move anymore, that you will need care forever. Helen paused, observing his face. But I will be here, okay? We will face this together. When Maria entered the room 15 minutes later, the contrast was striking. She approached the bed with reverence, as if she were in a church. Mr. Edward, I know you can hear me. I want you to know that I will take care of you as if you were my family. My mother always said that God puts people in our lives for a reason. She took a small St. Benedict medal from her pocket and placed it on the bedside table. This saint will protect you. Edward felt something stir within his chest, an emotion he hadn't expected to feel so soon in his trial. In the days that followed, as news of the accident spread through the social and business circles of Texas, two parallel realities began to unfold. Helen took on the role of a devoted fiancée publicly, posting photos in the hospital with touching captions that garnered thousands of likes and supportive comments. Privately, she was already making calls to lawyers about powers of attorney and wills. Maria, on the other hand, completely reorganized her routine. She began sleeping in a guest room of the estate to always be available, learned from nurses about special care, and every day brought small items from Texas to make the environment more welcoming. A sachet of lavender, an image of Our Lady of Remedies, a gourd made from buriti that she said brings luck to the sick. The difference between the two women became more evident with each passing day. Edward began to realize that he had completely underestimated the depth of the trial he had created for himself. The first month at home was a brutal revelation for Edward. The estate, which once represented success and achievement, had transformed into a stage where every gesture, every word, every silence gained amplified meaning. Architectural adaptations were necessary. A hospital bed now occupied the center of the master suite. Special elevators were installed, and ramps replaced some steps. Helen had hired a private nursing team, 3 professionals who rotated in 8-hour shifts. "The best for you, my love," she would say, but Edward sensed that it was mainly a way for her to avoid being directly involved in the more intimate and exhausting care. "Good morning, Prince," Helen greeted him every morning, kissing his forehead before positioning herself strategically for a selfie. The angle was always perfect. She appeared radiant and dedicated, while he emerged in profile, vulnerable in the hospital bed. The captions were masterpieces of emotional marketing. "Every day is a victory by my love's side. Strength, Edward, true love. Together we will always be more." Maria had taken on a completely different role. While the nurses handled the technical aspects, medication, physical therapy exercises, hygiene, she dedicated herself to something that no medical manual taught: caring for the soul. "Mr. Edward, today I brought something special," she said one April morning, entering the room with a small clay pot. "My grandmother always said that the smell of home-cooked food awakens the memory of the heart. I made a fish stew, like back home." The aroma that filled the room was indescribable, a mix of cilantro, sweet pepper, and palm oil that transported Edward to places he had never physically known, but somehow recognized deep in his soul. Maria placed the pot on a small table next to the bed and sat in the chair that had become her constant companion. "You don't need to do this," murmured the morning nurse, a technical and efficient woman named Valerie. "The patient has a controlled diet." "I'm not going to feed him," Maria replied patiently. "I just want him to smell home. Smell doesn't make anyone gain weight or do harm." Edward, who pretended to look at the ceiling, caught the exchange of glances between the two women. Valerie discreetly rolled her eyes, but Maria remained unperturbed, slowly stirring the stew so that the aroma would spread better. "No, Mr. Edward," Maria began, as she did every day, speaking as if he could respond normally. "Today I received a letter from my Emma. She is learning to play the recorder at school and wants to play a song for when I come back. Jack also sent a drawing. He drew you riding thunder, all smiling." She took a folded piece of paper from her pocket and carefully opened it. The drawing by a 12-year-old showed a man in a hat on a brown horse with a yellow sun and blue birds in the background. At the bottom, in the uncertain handwriting of youth, it read, "For my mum's boss to get better soon." "He doesn't even know you well, but he's already praying for you every day before bed," Maria continued, doubling down on the effort. Edward gently held the paper. "Children have a pure heart, you know. They feel things that we sometimes can't see." Edward felt a tightness in his chest. How long had it been since someone spoke to him about simple, genuine things without ulterior motives? In the afternoon, Helen returned from a photo shoot for a cosmetics brand that had sponsored a charity editorial about her new life as a caregiver. She brought with her an expensive bouquet of flowers and a professional photographer. "Darling, I'm going to take some pictures of you to post. The followers are really worried about you," she announced, already indicating the best angles for the professional. The photos lasted 2 hours. Helen changed outfits 3 times, always looks that conveyed understated elegance and chic suffering. In some, she held Edward's hand with a melancholic expression. In others, she arranged the flowers in a vase with a maternal air. In the last series, she appeared reading a book by the bed, as if it were a spontaneous scene of marital dedication. "Perfect! These photos will show how our love story is beautiful even in difficulties," Helen commented, reviewing the images on the camera. The photographer, a skinny young man with a beard named Thomas, seemed uncomfortable. "Ms. Helen, don't you think it's a bit invasive? The guy is in a pretty delicate situation." "Thomas, you don't understand. Sometimes vulnerability is inspiring. How many people will feel motivated seeing that true love overcomes any obstacle?" Edward, observing everything through his intertwined eyelids, felt nauseous, not because of the physical condition he pretended to have, but because of the realization that Helen had turned his supposed tragedy into profitable content. When everyone left to edit and select the photos, Maria returned to the room with a small wooden box. "Mr. Edward, I brought something that I hope you won't mind," she said, sitting back down in the chair. "It's a little radio that my late husband gave me. It only picks up this station from Texas, but the sound is clear." She turned on the device, and a soft melody of country music filled the room. The raspy voice of the singer narrated a story of longing and hope, accompanied by the hypnotic rhythm of the triangle and accordion. "My Joshua used to say that music heals what medicine can't reach," Maria murmured, adjusting the volume to keep it low. "He died listening to this station, tuberculosis, but until the last day when a beautiful song played, he smiled." The contrast was striking. While Helen turned drama into spectacle, Maria shared her deepest pain in a genuine attempt at connection and healing. "You know," Maria continued, pulling a small crochet project from her bag, "I never had much education, but my mother always said one thing. God made 2 types of people in the world, those who help and those who hinder. You choose every day which one you'll be." Her hands moved the crochet hook with automatic precision, creating small yellow flowers that connected to one another. "I'm making a quilt for you. Each little flower is a prayer. When it's finished, there will be over 1,000 prayers covering you." Edward had to make a superhuman effort not to show emotion. The raw sincerity of that simple woman was breaking down defenses he had built over decades. That night, after the nurses left and Maria went to her room, Helen approached the bed with a different expression, less performative, more calculating. "Edward, I need to talk to you about some practical matters," she began, pulling up a chair. "The doctors were very clear about the permanence of your condition, and I've been thinking a lot about our future." She paused, as if carefully choosing her words. "I love you, you know that. But I'm also realistic. We'll need to make some important decisions about managing the business, about searches. It's better to organize everything while you can, still make conscious decisions." Edward realized that Helen had rehearsed that speech. Every word was measured, every pause calculated to sound like genuine concern. "I spoke with Dr. Robert Mills. You remember him, your father's lawyer. He said it would be wise for you to sign some documents while you still have full mental capacity. It's just a precaution, you understand." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sound of Maria's radio in the next room, still playing northeastern melodies. Edward began to understand that he had completely underestimated the chasm between true love and self-serving convenience, and that the coming months would reveal depths of character, both of others and himself, that he had never imagined existed. The second month brought a routine that revealed, day by day, the true nature of the people around Edward. The mornings always began the same way. Valerie arrived at 6 o'clock for the first care, followed by Maria with the black coffee scented with cinnamon that she had learned to make just the way he liked. "Good morning, Mr. Edward," Maria always greeted him with the same tenderness, as if he were a dear friend and not her boss. "Today I brought a surprise. My close friend Constance sent cashew candy from Maplewood. The smell is so good that even angels must want to come down from heaven." She carefully opened the package wrapped in banana leaves and let the sweet aroma spread throughout the room. It wasn't about eating. Edward couldn't chew anything solid in his pretended condition, but about awakening memories, about humanizing that hospital environment. Helen, for her part, had developed her own routine that involved strategic appearances for photos and videos. She always arrived impeccably dressed, with carefully chosen looks that conveyed elegant suffering. Her Instagram stories had calculated timings. One early in the morning showing her care routine, another in the middle of the afternoon with reflections on strength and overcoming, and one at night with gratitude for the little moments. "Darling, today I'm going to film some content about how I reorganized our house for your special needs," Helen announced one morning, accompanied by a team of 3 people, a cameraman, an assistant, and an accessibility consultant she had hired just to appear in the video. For 2 hours, the estate became a filming set. Helen showcased the adaptations made: ramps, elevators, modified bathrooms, always emphasizing her role as a dedicated partner who spared no effort. The speech was perfect, the tears just right, the emotion calculated to the millimeter. "It's hard, but true love never abandons, right?" she said to the camera, holding Edward's limp hand. "Every day is a lesson in gratitude and strength." Edward, observing through half-closed eyelids, noticed how she avoided looking directly at him during these recordings. Her eyes were always on the camera, in the reflection of some mirror, anywhere but on the man she supposedly loved. After the crew left, Maria entered the room to clean up the mess, left by the equipment. She found Edward with a tense expression, even pretending to be paralyzed. It was impossible to completely disguise the embarrassment. "Oh, Mr. Edward, sorry for all this commotion," Maria murmured, collecting cables and rearranging the nightstand. "Miss Helen is trying to help in her own way, right? Everyone has their way of dealing with suffering." The generosity of that woman was disarming. Even seeing Helen's questionable actions, Maria always found a kind way to interpret the situation. You know, she continued, gently wiping Edward's face with a damp cloth, my mother always said that God tests us in two ways, when life is bad and when it's too good. I think Miss Helen has never truly faced hardship, so she doesn't know how to act when things get tough. That afternoon brought an event that would completely change the dynamics of the house. Maria was organizing Edward's clothing closet when she noticed something strange behind one of the drawers of the old mahogany desk that had belonged to his grandfather. "Wow," she murmured, discovering a small secret compartment. Her hands trembled slightly as she realized there were documents inside, yellowed papers, old photographs, and what appeared to be handwritten letters. Edward, pretending to sleep in bed, followed the entire scene through his interlaced eyelids. Those documents contained information about secret investments, offshore accounts, and mainly love letters that his mother had written to his father decades ago, a true emotional and financial treasure. Maria looked at the papers for a few seconds, then glanced at Edward sleeping. Her expression revealed an internal conflict, the natural curiosity of anyone against the respect for her employer's privacy. "It's not my business," she whispered to herself, putting everything back exactly as she found it, and closing the compartment. Everyone has their secrets. Edward was deeply impressed. Anyone else, including Helen, he was sure, would have at least taken a peek at the contents, but Maria had chosen absolute discretion. 2 hours later, when Helen went upstairs to change before heading out to a charity dinner, "I need to maintain social appearances, dear. It's important for our business." Edward pretended to wake up and caught her attention with a low groan. "Are you okay? Do you want something?" Helen approached, but kept a distance to avoid wrinkling the designer dress she had just put on. Edward forced an expression of anguish and directed his gaze to the desk. After a few attempts, he managed to communicate through blinks that he wanted something from that piece of furniture. "Oh, you want something from Grandpa's desk?" Helen went to the furniture and started opening drawers randomly. "What do you want? Any documents?" Edward kept blinking, his gaze fixed on the same drawer. Helen opened it, rummaged superficially, and found nothing. But Edward noticed something crucial. Unlike Maria, Helen showed no respect for the organization of the furniture. She scattered papers, carelessly flipped through old photographs, even skimmed through some personal documents. "There's nothing important here, dear, just old paperwork and old photos," she said, leaving everything in disarray. "I'll organize this properly for you later." The contrast was striking. Maria had stumbled upon the secret compartment by chance and respected it completely. Helen, searching intentionally, failed to discover it but violated without hesitation the privacy that was within her reach. That night, after Helen left for the social event, which she would document exhaustively on social media, Maria returned to the room for the nightly care. "Mr. Edward, may I tidy up that desk? It got a bit messy this morning," she said, always asking for permission for everything. Edward blinked once, the signal for yes they had established. Maria worked for an hour, organizing each photograph chronologically, sorting documents by categories, putting everything away with reverential care. Her hands touched each object as if they were sacred relics of a family's history. "These old photos are beautiful," she murmured, observing an image of Edward's parents on their wedding day. "You can see in their eyes that it was true love. Your father looks at your mother as if she were the most precious thing in the world." She paused, delicately holding the photograph. "You know, Mr. Edward, I think we recognize true love because it makes us more beautiful inside and out. My late Joshua was like that. A simple man, uneducated. But when he looked at me, I felt like the most important woman in the world." Edward felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in years, that sweet nostalgia of recognizing something true being described by someone who had truly lived it. I pray every day that you find that kind of love again, Maria continued, carefully putting the photograph away, because only those who truly love can see the person we are when everything else is gone. In that moment, Edward understood that his test was revealing much more than he had imagined. It was about discovering who loved him for who he was, but about rediscovering his own ability to recognize and value true love when it appeared. And that love was there every day in the calloused hands of a simple woman who organized his photographs as if they were treasures, who respected his secrets without even knowing they existed, and who spoke about love with the authority of someone who truly understood what it meant. The third month brought a subtle yet significant change in the routine of the estate. Maria had adopted the habit of reading to Edward every afternoon between 3 and 4 o'clock, when the sun filtered through the curtains, creating a warm, golden light in the room. "Mr. Edward, today I brought a book that changed my life when I was young," she announced one June afternoon, carrying a worn copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. "My fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, said every Brazilian should read Mark Twain at least once in their life. It took me 3 years to buy this book. I got it second-hand at a fair in Austin." Edward watched her hands reverently flipping through the yellowed pages. The edges were worn from handling, some loose pages held together by old tape, and there were notes in the margins made with pencil, difficult words circled, passages underlined, small comments written in the careful handwriting of someone who had struggled to learn to write. "You're going to like this story," Maria said, adjusting the cheap reading glasses she used. "It talks about people like me, people who suffer but don't lose their dignity." Her voice, with the melodic accent of Texas, brought Mark Twain's words to life in a way Edward had never experienced. When she read about Frank and Miss Victoria, it was not just literature. It was living memory, shared experience, recognized pain. "Frank, you are a man," he exclaimed aloud. He held back, noticing that the boys were nearby. Surely they would be amazed to hear him speak. Maria read slowly, then paused. "You know, Mr. Edward, this part always moves me. Frank thought he couldn't speak properly, that he was less than others. But he had dignity, he loved his family. Sometimes we are worth much more than we realize." Edward realized that Maria was not just reading, she was interpreting each passage through her own life experience. When she spoke about drought, her voice carried the weight of someone who knew hunger. When she described the love between Frank and Miss Victoria, there was a tenderness of someone who had truly loved and lost. "Miss Victoria wished to have a bed like Mr. Thomas's," she continued. "Oh, how I understand that woman. We don't want luxury, do we? We just want dignity, a little corner of our own, you know." Those reading sessions became the most anticipated moment of the day for Edward, not only for the quality of the interpretation, but for the genuine intimacy that was created. Maria shared her own memories related to each chapter, creating layers of meaning that enriched the experience. When Helen discovered the activity, she reacted with her typical condescension. "Maria, how sweet of you to read to him. But maybe it's better to choose more elevated books. I can lend you some American bestsellers I have. Self-help, you know. More positive. For the moment he's going through." "Thank you, Mrs. Helen, but Mr. Edward is enjoying this story, and I believe every book that teaches about life has value." Maria replied diplomatically, but continued with Mark Twain. Edward observed the difference. Helen saw reading as behavioral therapy, something to improve the mood. Maria saw it as a communion of souls, a sharing of humanity. During this time, Helen intensified her social activities. She became a spokesperson for a non-profit supporting families of people with disabilities, a position that earned her interviews in magazines and appearances on TV shows. "Because that touches me very personally, right?" she would say in interviews, always elegant and appropriately emotional. When you live this situation up close, you realize how our society needs to be more inclusive. The numbers of her followers skyrocketed. Brands began to seek her out for inspirational partnerships. Helen had transformed Edward's supposed tragedy into a platform for personal and professional growth. "Darling, we received a wonderful invitation," she announced one afternoon, entering the room with a bouquet of flowers and the usual photographer. "The magazine people wants to do a feature on our love story. How true love overcomes any obstacle. That will be the title." Edward watched the photo session with growing discomfort. Helen had changed outfits 5 times, tested 16 different poses, and directed every angle as if it were a Hollywood production. At no point did she look at him as a person, only as a backdrop for her own heroic narrative. "Perfect. These photos will show all of Brazil how inspiring our story is," Helen commented, reviewing the images. "Darling, you're going to be famous. Our story will give hope to so many people." Meanwhile, Maria continued her discreet routine of care. In addition to her daily reading, she had created small rituals that made each day special: a different seasoning in the chicken broth, a flower from the garden on the bedside table, a new song on the small radio. "Mr. Edward, today I want to read a part that always makes me cry," she said one afternoon, opening the book to a page marked with a piece of string. And Miss Victoria, burning the huasero, lamented his life. Her voice trembled slightly as she read the passage about the death of the dog Bella. The tears that streamed down her face were genuine, born from a deep empathy for all suffering, human or animal. "I'm sorry, Mr. Edward. It's just that this part reminds me of when I lost my dog Princess back in Maplewood. She got sick and I didn't have money for the vet. To this day I blame myself." Edward felt his heart tighten. The ability Maria's sincere emotional response to the pain of others, even fictional, contrasted brutally with the calculated theatricality of Helen. "You know," Maria continued, wiping her eyes, "my mother used to say that we only truly understand a story when it speaks to our own wounds. That's why I like reading to you. I think stories help heal what's hurt inside us." That night, after Maria retreated to her room, Edward stayed awake for hours reflecting. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about the test he had created, but about the privilege of receiving care from someone with that emotional depth. He began to realize that Maria wasn't just taking care of his physical body. She was nurturing something much deeper. Through literature, music, and small daily gestures, she was offering him a form of love he had never known. Love without possession, without interest, without expectation of return. It was the kind of love his mother had described in the letters he kept in the secret compartment of his desk. Love that rejoices in the well-being of others, that finds purpose in care, that sees beauty where others see only difficulty. For the first time since he had started that charade, Edward wondered if he had been testing the wrong people. Perhaps the real question wasn't about discovering who loved him, but whether he would be able to recognize and reciprocate love when it appeared disguised as simplicity and service. What if that love had been there all along, every day, in the voice that transformed Mark Twain into oral poetry, in the hands that organized his photographs with reverence, in the heart that wept for fictional characters because it knew what it meant to truly suffer? The 4th month brought an unexpected transformation to the environment of the estate. Maria had suggested changes to the decor of the room. Small alterations, she said, were to make the environment cozier. Edward, through blinks, had agreed to all of them. "Mr. Edward, I brought some souvenirs." "Hey, from Texas," she said one morning, carrying a small cardboard suitcase. "They're things from my family, but I want to share them with you." She took out simple objects but filled with history. A hand-embroidered dish towel from her grandmother, with red and yellow flowers, an old holy card of St. Benedict, already faded by time, small sachets of lavender sewn with colourful ribbons, and a lace towel that had been part of her mother's trousseau. "This lace here," Maria said, delicately running her fingers over the fabric, "my mother made when she was young, dreaming of her own wedding. She said that each little stitch was a wish for happiness. She never had the money to complete the entire trousseau, but she kept this towel her whole life." Edward watched Maria lay the towel over the nightstand with the same care one handles a sacred relic. The contrast with the expensive and cold objects of the original decor was striking. Those simple fabrics brought a humanity that all the money in the world could not buy. "You know, Mr. Edward," she continued, arranging the lavender sachets in small corners of the room, "my mother always said that our home has to smell like family. It has to have history in the walls. It doesn't matter if it's beautiful, if it doesn't have a soul." The soft scent of lavender mixed with the smell of the clove that Maria always carried in her pocket, creating a completely new atmosphere. The room, once as sterile as a hospital, began to have personality, to tell stories. Helen, when she went upstairs to change before a photo session, immediately noticed the changes. "Maria, what is all this? Why did you spread these old things around the room?" Her voice carried a mix of disbelief and barely concealed irritation. "These are souvenirs from my family, Mrs. Helen. Mr. Edward said he liked them," Maria replied calmly, continuing to organize the objects. "But this doesn't match the decor. This room was designed by a famous designer from São Paulo. This mix completely characterizes the environment." Helen picked up the holy card of Saint Benedict and looked at it with disdain. "And this? You can't just hang religious images around the house without permission." Edward, pretending to sleep, felt indignation rising within his chest. The way Helen referred to Maria's cherished objects, old things, mix, revealed not only social prejudice, but a total inability to recognize the emotional value that transcends monetary worth. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Helen, but I just wanted to make the environment cozier for him. I can take it down if you prefer," Maria offered, though her voice clearly showed the hurt she felt. "Look, Maria, I know your intentions are good, but you need to understand that there is a standard of quality in this house. Edward is used to a certain refinement. These things may have sentimental value for you, but they are not suitable for this environment." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Maria lowered her eyes and began to collect the lavender sachets, her slow movements betraying the humiliation she felt. "Let me explain better," Helen continued, seemingly interpreting the silence as agreement. "It's nothing against you personally. It's just that everything has its appropriate place, you understand? Your souvenirs would look lovely in your room, but here—" "I understand, Mrs. Helen," Maria gently interrupted. "You are right." Edward watched Maria collect each object with a reverential care, as if she were storing pieces of her own heart. The lace towel from her mother was folded with special attention, the holy card kissed discreetly before being placed back in the suitcase. After Helen left for her photo session, this time an editorial on elegance in difficult times, Maria returned to the room. Edward expected to find her upset, perhaps even crying. But when she entered, she carried only her small radio and a lavender sachet. "Mr. Edward, I know that Mrs. Helena is right about the decor," she said, sitting in her usual chair. "Everyone in their place, right? But may I leave just a little lavender sachet here nearby? It's to ward off bad vibes and bring good dreams." Edward winked once. "Yes." Maria smiled and discreetly placed the sachet under his pillow. "Thank you, Mr. Edward. You are very kind to me." That phrase echoed in Edward's mind for hours. Maria thanked him for allowing her to put a lavender sachet under his pillow. Helena had publicly humiliated Maria's most cherished belongings, belittled her culture and family traditions, and yet Maria found reasons for gratitude. In the afternoon, during the reading session, Maria chose a different passage from the book. "Today I will read a part that always gives me hope, Mr. Edward. It's when Frank dreams of a better future for his children." Her voice took on a special tone as she read, "The boys in schools learning difficult and necessary things. Yes, sir, it was a dream that brightened Frank's heart." Maria paused, taking off her glasses to wipe away a tear that stubbornly rolled down. "You know, Mr. Edward, I understand this, Frank. We may not have much in life, but we always dream that our children will have more. My Jack wants to be a veterinarian, and Emma dreams of being a teacher. I work far from them precisely so they can study and not go through the same difficulties I faced." Edward realized at that moment something that struck him like lightning. Maria was not working in the estate merely out of immediate necessity. She was investing in her children's future, sacrificing her own happiness so they could have opportunities she never had. "You know," Maria continued, putting her glasses back on, "sometimes I wonder if it's worth it to be away from them for so long. But then I remember what my mother always said, child, education is the only inheritance that no one can take from us. And taking care of you teaches me a lot about patience, about kindness." She looked at Edward with a maternal tenderness. "You may not know, but caring for someone in need teaches us about what really matters in life. It makes me a better person, you know." Edward felt something breaking inside his chest. Maria was not just caring for him, she was growing through that care, finding purpose and meaning in a situation that most people would see only as hard and poorly paid work. That night, for the first time in 4 months, Edward felt like giving up the charade, not because he had discovered everything he wanted to know about Helena, that had become clear weeks ago, but because he was beginning to realize that the test was revealing something about himself he did not expect to find. He was learning that there is a form of love so pure and selfless that the person who practices it does not even recognize its greatness. Maria did not know she was loving Edward in the highest possible way, without possessiveness, without expectations, turning care into art and service into devotion. And he was beginning to suspect that perhaps he did not deserve such love. Not yet. Perhaps he first needed to learn to be worthy of that generosity of heart that Maria demonstrated every day, even when she was humiliated, even when her family treasures were called old things. The test had transformed into something much greater, a lesson about the difference between deserving love and receiving grace. The 5th month arrived with a proposal that would completely change the dynamics of the house. Maria received a call on Monday morning that left her visibly shaken. Edward, pretending to sleep, observed through his intertwined eyelids as she spoke softly in the hallway. "Yes, Mr. Antonio, I understand. It's a really good opportunity. Palm Springs. Exclusive chef for the resort. House included for me and the kids." Her voice trembled between disbelief and emotion. "Can I think until Friday? Thank you, Mr. Antonio. God bless you." When Maria entered the room for the morning care, Edward noticed she was different. Her movements maintained the same delicacy as always, but there was a contained restlessness, as if she carried an invisible weight. "Good morning, Mr. Edward," she greeted as always, but her voice sounded distant. "Today I brought burnt coconut pancakes. The smell reminds me of the summer festivals back home." She set the table with her usual care, but Edward noticed her hands trembling slightly as she handled the coffee cup. When Maria sat down in the chair for their usual conversation, she fell silent for a few minutes, as if struggling with something internal. "Mr. Edward," she finally began, "I need to talk to you about something important. I know you may not be able to respond, but I need to speak anyway." Edward felt his heart race. There was something in Maria's voice he had never heard before, a mix of hope and desperation that unsettled him deeply. I received a job offer in Palm Springs, California. A luxury resort wants me to be their exclusive chef for regional cuisine. The salary is 3 times what I earn here, and they provide a house in the village for my children to live with me. She paused, nervously fiddling with the hem of her apron. You know, Mr. Edward, since Joshua passed away, I've never had an opportunity like this, to bring my children close to me, to give them a real home, not having to share a room with my mother-in-law. Her voice faltered slightly. Jack could study in a better school. Emma could take music lessons. Edward watched tears forming in Maria's eyes. She was visibly torn between the opportunity of a lifetime and something that held her back there. But I don't know how to leave you in the situation you're in, she continued, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. It's not fair. You need care. You need someone who understands that behind this paralysis is a person with feelings, with longing, with dreams. Maria stood up and walked to the window, observing the garden of the estate. Mrs. Helen is a good woman, but she doesn't understand some things. She takes care of you the best way she knows how, but it's different. I'm afraid of how you will be if I leave. Edward felt a tightness in his chest that went far beyond the physical. For the first time in 5 months, he was genuinely desperate. The thought of Maria leaving, of losing that bright presence that had transformed his days, was unbearable. I'll stay for 3 more days. To think, Maria murmured, returning to the chair. I need to make the right decision. My children deserve a present mother, but you also deserve to be cared for with love. During the next 3 days, Edward lived through an agony he hadn't expected to feel. Maria maintained the normal routine, reading, conversations, affectionate care. But there was a melancholy in the air, a sense of imminent farewell that made everything heavy with emotion. When Mrs. Helen learned of the possible departure of Maria, she reacted in a completely unexpected way. That's great, Maria. What a wonderful opportunity, she exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. You deserve so much. And don't worry about us. I already know an agency that provides professional caregivers. It will even be better to have someone more specialized taking care of Edward. Edward realized that Mrs. Helen was genuinely relieved at the prospect of Maria leaving. Without her around, she would have free rein for her maneuvers without the judging, albeit silent, gaze of the caregiver. On Thursday night, Maria entered the room with an expression of someone who had made a difficult decision. Mr. Edward, I need to tell you something. I've decided to stay. Edward felt such an intense relief that he had to make an effort not to show it. I called Mr. Anthony and thanked him for the opportunity, but I said I couldn't accept. Do you know why? Maria approached the bed and gently touched his hand. Because not everything in life can be bought with money. She sat in the chair and began to speak with a conviction that Edward had never heard in her voice. My mother always said that God places us in people's lives for a reason, and I feel that my place now is here, taking care of you. It's not about money, it's not about opportunity, it's about doing what's right. Maria took a crumpled letter out of her pocket. I wrote a letter to my children explaining my decision. I told them that sometimes we need to choose between what is good for us and what is the right thing to do, and that a true mother teaches her children by example, not just with words. Edward watched Maria carefully fold the letter. Jack replied that he understood. He said he is proud to have a mother who doesn't abandon those in need. Emma sent a drawing. She drew me and you and wrote underneath, Mom taking care of her friend. At that moment, Edward understood that he was in the presence of something extraordinary. Maria had given up the opportunity to reunite her family, to give a better life to the children she loved more than anything, because she believed he needed her. You know, Mr. Edward, Maria continued. "I don't know if I will regret this decision in a few years. Maybe my children will question me one day, but I know that if I were to leave now, I would regret it for the rest of my life." She remained silent for a few minutes, just holding his hand. You may not know this, but taking care of someone we love teaches us about who we really are. And I discovered that I am the kind of person who does not abandon those in need, no matter the price I have to pay. Edward felt tears forming in his eyes. For the first time in 5 months, he had to make a superhuman effort not to break the facade. The absolute generosity of that woman, her capacity for sacrifice without expectation of recognition, her practical definition of love as service, all of this was demolishing the emotional defenses he had built over decades. "Now I'm going to read a little for you," Maria said, picking up the book by Mark Twain. "Today I'm going to read the part where Frank decides not to flee from the drought, decides to face the difficulties where he is. I think sometimes we need to learn that chasing after opportunities isn't always the right thing to do." As Maria's melodic voice filled the room with the words of Twain, Edward understood that he had learned something about love that no book, no previous experience, no relationship had taught him. True love is not just about feeling, it's about choosing. And Maria had chosen to give up her own future because she believed he needed her, without knowing that he could hear her, without expectation of gratitude, without any guarantee that her sacrifice would be recognized or valued. It was the kind of love he had sought his whole life without knowing it existed, and it was there every day, disguised as simple care and silent dedication. The 6th month arrived with subtle but significant changes in the atmosphere of the estate. Maria had developed an even more affectionate routine after her decision to stay, as if she had fully embraced her role as a caregiver. Her mornings always began with small surprises, a different tea made with herbs she cultivated in a makeshift garden in the back of the house, a new song on the small radio, or a childhood story she shared while tidying up the room. "Mr. Edward, today I brought something very special," she said one August morning, carrying a small wooden box decorated with regional designs. "It's a gift that my daughter Emma sent for you." She opened the box, revealing a set of playing cards hand-painted by a 9-year-old girl. Each card had naive yet heartfelt drawings. The king was a man in a hat on a horse, clearly inspired by Edward. The queen was a woman in an apron, Maria, and the numbers were decorated with suns, flowers, and colorful birds. "Emma said she made these special cards for you to enjoy when I couldn't be around. She doesn't know that you can't move your hands, but I told her I would explain the cards to you as if it were a different game." Maria arranged some cards on the table where Edward could see them. "Emma wrote a little letter too. Can I read it?" Edward blinked once. Yes. Maria unfolded a colorful piece of paper with the child's uneven handwriting. "To Mommy's friend. Mommy said you are sick and can't play. I made these cards for you to smile. When you get better, I want you to come visit our house. Mommy said you are very nice. Kisses from Emma." Edward felt his heart tighten. Maria's daughter, a child he had never seen, who grew up far from her mother because of the work she did to support the family, had dedicated hours painting playing cards for a stranger who was sick. "You know, Mr. Edward," Maria continued, carefully putting the cards away, "my kids always ask me about you. They want to know what you're like, if you like music, what kind of food you prefer. I think they already consider you part of the family." That phrase echoed in Edward's mind, part of the family. To Maria and her children, he was not just a boss or a patient. He was someone who deserved genuine affection, real concern, spontaneous gestures of care. Later, during the reading session, Maria brought something different. "Today I won't read Mark Twain, Mr. Edward. I want to show you something I found when I was organizing the papers on your desk." Edward felt a chill run down his spine. Had she discovered the secret compartment? Maria took out a carefully folded piece of paper from her pocket. "I found this letter that fell behind the desk when I was cleaning. It must have slipped from somewhere." It was one of the letters his mother had written to his father decades ago. Edward immediately recognized the delicate handwriting and the yellowed paper. "I didn't read it, of course. It's not my business. But I saw that it's from a woman named Eleanor to someone named Robert. They must be your relatives. Can I read it to you? Maybe it will be a nice memory." Edward hesitated. Those letters were intimate, filled with emotion. But there was something in the respectful way Maria had found the paper, in the way she asked for permission before reading, that calmed him. He blinked. Once yes. Maria adjusted her glasses and began to read in her melodic voice. "My dear Robert, today marks 6 months since you proposed to me, and I still wake up every day thinking I'm dreaming. You told me you love me, not for what I seem or what I have, but for who I am when no one is watching. What a beautiful thing to say to someone, isn't it?" Maria's voice took on a special tenderness as she continued. "You make me feel beautiful even when my hair is messy in the kitchen, that I'm smart even. When I say silly things, that I'm strong even when I'm crying. That's how I know our love is true, because you see me better than I see myself." Edward closed his eyes tightly. That was the letter where his mother described what she felt for his father at the beginning of their courtship. He had read it dozens of times throughout his life, but he had never realized the depth of those words until he heard them in Maria's voice. "What a beautiful letter, Mr. Edward. This Elena must have loved this Robert very much. You can feel in the words that it was a true love, the kind that makes us want to be better people." Maria carefully folded the letter again with reverential care. "Can I put it back where I found it? Love letters are treasures that deserve to be protected." That night, after Maria left, Edward kept thinking about the words of his mother's letter interpreted by Maria's voice. True love is when someone sees us better than we see ourselves. Was that what was happening to him? Maria treated him as if he were a better person than he really was, kinder, more deserving of care, more worthy of sacrifices. She had created an idealized version of him in her mind and was loving that version with absolute dedication. But what if she discovered the facade? What if she knew he was capable of pretending to be paralyzed for months to test the people around him? What if she found out he had wasted the opportunity to reunite his family because of an elaborate lie? The guilt Edward felt grew day by day, not only for deceiving Maria, but for allowing her to make sacrifices based on a false situation. She had given up Palm Springs, was far from her children, dedicating her life to caring for someone who didn't need that care. During the following week, Edward watched Maria with painful attention. He noticed how she spoke to her children on the phone every night, trying to keep her voice cheerful while they talked about school, friends, the small victories and frustrations of daily life. He saw how she kept every drawing they sent, how she read and reread the letters, how she sometimes cried softly in her room, thinking no one was watching. "Mommy, when are you coming back?" Edward heard Emma asking during one of the night calls. "Soon, my daughter. Mommy is taking care of a very special person who needs us, but soon, very soon, I'm going back home." "Do you love him more than us?" the girl asked with the brutal honesty of children. Maria fell silent for a few seconds before responding. "My daughter, a mother's heart is like the bread that Jesus multiplied. There's always room for more love. I love you more than anything in the world, but that doesn't stop me from caring for someone who needs it." Edward realized in that conversation that Maria had found a way to love that didn't diminish with distance, nor divided among other objects of affection. She loved her children and cared for him not as a choice between two loves, but as an expression of the same infinite capacity to give. It was the kind of love he had sought his whole life, abundant, generous love that multiplies instead of divides. And it was being offered to him by a simple woman who didn't even know she was demonstrating the highest form of love that exists. For the first time since the farce began, Edward wondered if he was being tested as well, if all that theatre was, in fact, an opportunity that life had created for him to learn about true love through the eyes of someone who knew how to practice it effortlessly. The 7th month arrived with a discovery that would change everything. Maria was organizing the documents on the desk, a task she did monthly with the care of someone handling relics, when she found something that deeply moved her. "Mr. Edward," she said with a trembling voice, "I found something very special here. It's a letter that seems to have been written by your mother." Edward felt his heart race. It was the letter his mother had written to him shortly before she passed away 10 years ago. A document he kept as the most precious possession he had. "Can I read it to you? I think it would do you good to hear your mother's words." Edward blinked once, although part of him wanted to shout, "No." That letter contained profound reflections on life, love, and death, words that could be dangerously revealing. Maria adjusted her glasses and began to read with reverence. "My dear son, if you are reading this letter, it's because I have already gone to be with your father. Don't be sad. I lived a full and happy life, mainly because I was your mother." Maria's voice already showed emotion, as if she were reading a letter addressed to herself. "Edward, I have always worried about one thing. You are so afraid of being hurt that you built walls around your heart. I know that past betrayals have hurt you, but don't let them stop you from finding true love." Maria paused, discreetly wiping away a tear. "Son, true love is not the kind that arrives shouting and making noise. It's the one that comes slowly, settles in small gestures, and reveals itself in everyday care. Sometimes the person who will truly love you is right in front of you, but you can't see them because you are looking in too complicated places." Edward felt as if his mother was speaking directly to him through Maria's lips. Each word echoed with a prophetic precision that left him breathless. "Please, my son, don't let fear prevent you from recognizing love when it appears, and when you find someone who loves you for who you really are, with all your imperfections and fears, don't be too proud to give yourself completely." Maria interrupted the reading, visibly moved. "Mr. Edward, what a wise woman your mother was. It seems she is speaking directly to your heart, doesn't it?" Edward was devastated. His mother's words, read in Maria's voice, created an emotional connection that struck him like lightning. It was as if the universe was conspiring to show him something he refused to see. "Can I continue?" Maria asked softly. Edward blinked once, although each word felt like a blow to his emotional defenses. "The last thing I want to tell you is about gratitude, son. I learned that the happiest people are not those who have the most, but those who recognize the value of what they receive. If someone comes into your life offering genuine love, true care, don't measure that gift by its wrapping. Sometimes the most precious treasures come disguised in simplicity." Maria carefully folded the letter, her eyes shining with emotion. "Mr. Edward, I feel that your mother wrote this letter thinking exactly of the moment you are living now. It's as if she knew one day you would need to hear these words." At that moment, Edward understood that he could no longer sustain the farce. Not out of guilt or fatigue, but because he had found exactly what he was looking for and was wasting every moment pretending to be in a condition that prevented him from expressing what he felt. Maria stood up from the chair and walked to the window, observing the garden where thunder grazed freely. "You know, Mr. Edward, I have a confession to make to you," she said without turning around. "I know you may not understand what I'm about to say, but I need to speak." Edward felt his whole body tense. "In these months taking care of you, I fell in love." Her voice was almost a whisper. "Not with the man you were before the accident, but with the person I discovered you are inside." Maria turned, her face flushed with emotion and embarrassment. "I fell in love with the way you listen, even without being able to respond. I feel that you truly hear me. I fell in love with the patience I see in your eyes when I tell silly stories. I fell in love with the way you blink when you want to say thank you, as if each little gesture of mine were important." Edward was truly paralyzed now, not by the farce, but by the intensity of that moment. Declaration. "I know this is crazy," Maria continued, her words spilling out in an emotional torrent. "I know I'm just a caregiver. I know you have a life, a fiancée. I know my love is impossible and perhaps even inappropriate. But I had to speak because keeping this inside was hurting me." She returned to the chair and sat down, covering her face with her hands. "You may not believe it, but I have never loved anyone like I love you. Not even my late Joshua, who was a good man and gave me wonderful children. But what I feel for you is different. It's as if I have found the other half of my soul." Maria took her hands from her face and looked directly at Edward. "I love you not out of pity, not out of gratitude, but because I discovered that you have the most beautiful heart I have ever known. Even without being able to move, even without being able to speak, you taught me about kindness, about dignity, about how it is possible to maintain humanity, even when everything seems lost." Edward felt tears streaming down his face, the first he couldn't control in 7 months of deception. "I'm sorry if I've said too much, Mr. Edward. I know you can't respond, but I needed you to know." "Tomorrow I will leave," said Maria, rising with determination. "Not because I don't love you, but precisely because I love too much. It's not fair to me to stay here loving someone I can't have, and it's not fair to Mrs. Helen to have a rival she doesn't even know exists." Maria headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. "I just want you to know one thing. Taking care of you has been the most beautiful experience of my life. You taught me that there is a way to love that doesn't need words, doesn't need grand gestures, doesn't even need reciprocation. It's a love that feeds only on existing, on caring, on being present." Edward watched Maria leave the room and knew he had reached the end of the line. He couldn't let the only person he had truly loved leave carrying an impossible love for someone who didn't even exist in the way she believed. For the first time in 7 months, Edward was absolutely certain of one thing. He was ready to reveal the truth. Not because the test had ended, but because he had found something far more valuable than all the answers he sought. He had found someone capable of loving his soul, and now he needed to discover if his soul was worthy of that love. Maria's decision to leave reached Helen as simultaneously expected and convenient news. The following morning, after the love declaration, Helen entered the room with an expression that mixed false concern with poorly disguised relief. "Edward, Maria came to me this morning saying she's leaving," she announced, fixing her hair in front of the wall mirror. "She said she needs to return to her children in Texas. Poor thing, she must be suffering so much away from her family." Edward observed Helen through his intertwined eyelids and noticed something that chilled him. She was genuinely happy about Maria's departure. There wasn't even an attempt to convince her to stay. "But don't worry, love. I've already contacted the best caregiving agency in the south of the country. They will send a professional specialized in cases like yours. Someone more suitable for our needs," Helen continued, checking a notification on her phone. The word suitable echoed in Edward's mind like a slap in the face. Helen considered Maria unsuitable. Unsuitable for being simple, for being from the South, for bringing scents of cinnamon and clove into the sterile estate, for reading Mark Twain with a Texas accent, for loving without asking for anything in return. Throughout the morning, Edward listened to the preparations for the departure, Maria organizing her few belongings, making calls to arrange a ticket back to Austin, speaking softly with the other caregivers who seemed genuinely sad about her leaving. In the afternoon, she entered the room for the farewell. She brought with her the small cardboard suitcase she had arrived with 7 months earlier, but now also carried a fabric bag where she kept the gifts she had received from her children during that time. "Mr. Edward, I came to say goodbye," she said, sitting down for the last time in the chair that had become her constant companion. "I want you to know that these months have been the most important of my life." Edward watched her in silence, memorizing every detail of that face that had become so familiar and dear. The always kind brown eyes, the fine wrinkles around her lips that revealed a life of smiles, even in difficulties, the small, calloused hands that had cared for him with such tenderness. "I left a few things for you," Maria continued, taking items from the bag. "The radio that played music from Texas. This way you will remember me when you listen to country music. The sachets of lavender that your mother loved so much, and the book by Mark Twain. It has all the pages I marked for you." She placed each item carefully on the bedside table, as if she were assembling an altar of memories. "And there's something special," she said, pulling out a small yellow envelope from her pocket. "It's a letter I wrote for you. I know you can't read it now, but maybe one day, who knows, medicine may evolve and you will recover. Then you can read it and remember the Maria who took care of you, with so much love." Edward felt his heart shattering. Maria was leaving without knowing that he could hear every word, that he had recorded every moment of care, every story told, every gesture of love. "Mr. Edward, I need to confess something before I leave," Maria said, her voice trembling. "Yesterday I said I fell in love with you, and it's true. But today I realize something even more important. I didn't fall in love. I fell in love with the person I became while taking care of you." She paused, searching for the right words. "You taught me that. Love isn't just feeling something good in your heart. Love is choosing every day to be better for someone. It's finding joy in caring, discovering strength where we didn't know we had it, and learning that the heart grows when we use it to serve." Maria stood up and walked to the window for the last time. "I'm leaving today, but I will take with me the certainty that I lived a true love. Maybe you will never be able to love me back, but that doesn't diminish what I felt. Love that is truly given is always worth it, even when it's not reciprocated." Edward was struggling against every fiber of his being not to stand up at that moment and confess everything. The pain of letting Maria leave believing in a lie was becoming unbearable. "Before I go, I want to say a prayer for you," Maria said, returning close to the bed. "My grandmother always said that a prayer made with love has a special power." She closed her eyes and began to pray with an intensity that Edward had never witnessed. "Lord, I entrust this man I have learned to love into your hands. Protect him. Give him strength to face each day, and if it is your will, allow him to find the happiness he deserves. If one day you restore his movements, let it be to embrace those who truly love him. And if that is not possible, may he know that he was truly loved at least once in his life." When Maria opened her eyes, tears were streaming down her face, but there was also a deep serenity. "Now I need to go. Mrs. Helen has already called a taxi to take me to the airport," she said, picking up the cardboard suitcase. "Mr. Edward, thank you so much for allowing me to take care of you. It was an honor." Maria leaned down and kissed Edward's forehead with a tenderness that made him tremble inside. It was a farewell kiss, but also a blessing, a gesture of gratitude, pure love. "Goodbye, my dear," she whispered. "May God bless each day of your life." Edward watched her leave the room, heard the sound of the suitcase being dragged down the marble stairs, listened to the front door opening and closing, then just silence. For the first time in 7 months, Edward was completely alone in the estate. Helen had left for a fashion event, the other staff members were quietly working on the lower floors, and the room that once vibrated with Maria's bright presence now felt like a mausoleum. Edward looked at the items she had left. The small radio still tuned to a station, the sachets of lavender spreading their soft fragrance, the book by Mark Twain with hundreds of pages marked with love and dedication. And in the center of the table, the yellow envelope with the letter she had written for him. In that moment of absolute solitude, Edward made the most important decision of his life. He could not let the only person he had truly loved leave, carrying an impossible love for a lie. He could not continue living a farce when he had found the reality he had been searching for his whole life. It was time to reveal the truth, not to test anyone else, not to discover anything more about himself, but to try to win back what he had let slip away out of pride and fear. It was time to go after Maria and show her that the man she had fallen in love with truly existed, and that he was desperately in love with her too. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and if you watched until here, comment, "I watched until here," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's very exciting.